Hi, it's Susan from More Peaceful, and I'm going to talk about homelessness today because I have been homeless for 2.5 years. I'm currently in emergency accommodation, thank goodness. It was a bit of a miracle, but it happened. But I am thinking about those who aren't in emergency housing, who are on the street, who can't move between houses because of the coronavirus, because majority of homeless are actually not on the street. They're either in overcrowded housing, some are staying with friends, some are in their cars, some might be camping, might have been transient, they might have moved around. Some will be on Centrelink, some won't. The group that aren't on Centrelink are the ones I'm most concerned about because they are the ones that have no money. They can't access services because you have to be on Centrelink in order to access homeless services. The only reason I have emergency accommodation right now, otherwise I would be in the forest, is because I'm studying. I got into free TAFE here in Victoria, and I had a sort of a service provider pay for my fees to actually get into TAFE. Otherwise, I couldn't have done it because I had no money. So this video is going to look at that. I'm also going to discuss a letter that I received from social services. I sent an email to the MP Luke Haworth, on the 18th of March 2020. And essentially what I was really asking was, what do people who are homeless do in respect of the coronavirus sort of restrictions? Because you can't go out unless there's 4 reasons, which I find extraordinary. And I just want to actually, before I go into this letter, I just want to premise this by saying that I was astounded that the police arrested a woman and her daughter. She's taking her daughter on a driving lesson and was fined $1,500, something around that amount. I was stunned. It's like, logically, a person who's taking their child for a driving lesson is clearly not going to be connecting with people in the public. It's her daughter and her. It's like going for a walk. What concerned me there was the police's response, because there's an emergency powers situation happening here. Normal things that we've all taken for granted can just be penned away by someone saying, you have only 4 reasons to be leaving your house. Well, when you're homeless, you might have other reasons why you need to leave your house, and it might have nothing to do with going for a walk. It might have nothing to do with shopping. It might have nothing to do with study or work. You might be leaving or moving around because you haven't got accommodation. So do we find them? And I say that with great sincerity because I was informed by a homeless person that she saw another one get fined, taken away, because they had a sign in respect of begging, because it's a bylaw. It's actually illegal to beg, believe it or not. It's a form of like soliciting donations under law. So you can see how things can get out of hand where common sense responses are not there. If we have this authoritarianism imposed, citing a larger issue of public health. But then there are other public health matters too, such as mental health issues when you've got no home. Even within people's homes themselves, conflicts that are arising within the home, there's mental health issues that can arise there, or even violence. As the government has quite rightfully acknowledged, domestic violence issues can arise. There has to be flexibility around these sort of emergency powers. There has to be common sense around it. Otherwise, we end up with very difficult situations for people on the ground because those in authority don't understand. They're not there. I'm quite certain that they'll be able to conduct business quite easily in their circumstances. But for the rest of the public, it's very trying. We're also under these mantras of you have to work, and then we've got the economic costs associated with living, such as rent, such as food, whether you're working or not working. And those two pathways will take you in two completely different areas. So if you're working, well, you won't be able to work under the coronavirus. So if you're a casualised worker, you're going to be in trouble, providing those employers do actually keep you on. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Even though there's payments going through, there can be issues around whether the money reaches the people, as we saw with the fires. Greed is a bit of an issue that we're facing in our society, and fear of not enough. So the homeless scenario, if you like, is the penultimate of people's greatest fears, is what do I do if I'm homeless and on the street? Well, I've been in a homeless capacity for many years, and the purpose of this video is to try and provide some sort of insight and also some solutions here too. I also want to highlight what is quite commonly the disconnect between government and the people, and in this case it's to do with homelessness. But there has to be a new way of engagement with society. There are other agendas going on, and yes, people will dissent against those agendas, but the thing is we need to really encourage dialogue, because what I find is that I can't even have basic dialogue with my government, and I don't even know if they are my government anymore because of the private interests. You know, it's like, who do you value, who don't you value, or are we all equal? You know, I guess we're going to find out. I guess we're finding out how we're perceived, but I can't see how that's going to create a better society if we're at odds with one another, if there's discrimination sitting there, which act as barriers to really resolving problems, rather than demonising certain people because they are not turning up in the image of the decent person, the working person, person that pays their taxes, etc. There are lots of social problems in our society that are generated through the economic system that are never addressed. Economics is always put forward as the solution to any social woes. Economic growth is constantly the mantra that everybody agrees with, it's normalised, and yet we are within an ecological circumstance which is incompatible with an economic mantra of continual growth. Even in respect of the IT digitisation, that's still an electrical system. You still have to have energy to supply internets, but internets are not your base manufacturers. The internet digital reality, the cyber reality that everybody seems so transfixed about in respect of the trillions they're going to make, to me is like a bubble. It's like an unreal bubble, and this is coming from the ground here. You know, I'm also trained in the area too of economics. It's like, it's a bubble that people want to believe in. It's like a big wish. We want to connect the entire world, and underneath that is this real desire for control. But the reality is, it's not a foundation to a balanced ecological, social, economic system. It's not a holistic system. It's a system that sees its profit coming out of advertising through data. So the data gathering becomes the big push. And then issues like privacy, which were held in legislation, that it was illegal to breach people's privacy, has now been all loosened because there's an economic imperative around it. So those morals, those decency of really respecting people goes to the wayside when there's an economic priority. And this is what concerns me from a homeless perspective, is this constant focus on economics as the solution without really making space around that to actually say, well, is that really the solution here, given the ecological systems breaking down, given we're having family breakdown as a result of economic pressure? Now, the human rights issue is an absolutely critical issue, yet it's been hived off as some form of impediment to economic growth. It's not an impediment. The human rights issues is saying we've got to balance things. We're all going to work together if we're going to create a better world. We have to respect very basic rights and needs of people. It's not about riding roughshod over people because they're not serving your purpose. We have to understand that people do have a right to shelter. They do have a right to self-determination. They do have a right to associate. Now, notwithstanding within the coronavirus times, okay, social distancing, that's acceptable as a setting aside of that right. Many of us, I'm quite sure, are quite okay with setting aside of certain rights in order for a greater good to occur, such as a health pandemic, if in fact it is a pandemic, which I'm certainly not convinced of that at this point. However, there is a process taking place, and there appears to be evidence from an overseas perspective, but certainly in Australia we're only looking at, I think, 300 people with it. I haven't looked at the latest statistics on how many have died, but I certainly know that with influenza we're looking at 1,500 to 3,000 a year that die and 18,000 presentations to hospital. So I'd be looking at contrasting that. Yes, it's a fast-spreading problem. I understand why hand washing and all the rest of it, and I'm complying with that. I will comply with things that I think are fair, or until I know for certain, I will comply. But if I think or find evidence to the contrary, then I won't, because then it becomes an inhibitor of human rights. So always there's this tension between government, the public, what is true, what is not true, the economic mantras versus the social policy needs or the social needs of the society, the economic impacts on the society which cause these externalities such as homelessness, which are not looked at. It's not just about sending money into that problem. It's about actually looking at the structure that causes the problem in the first place, the trauma-induced homelessness, which most of it is, from what I'm saying, and whether privatisation is the appropriate response to social services given the profit motive, and how does that then tackle those who aren't on Centrelink. So as citizens, they miss out on help because they're not profitable to those service providers. Is that a fair system? It's like, if that was your family member, is that how you would treat them? I mean, these are really the issues that I'm seeing as really problematic, is that we're not really caring about people. And I've certainly witnessed it in my own life. 2.5 years without a home, that says a lot about the lack of response in the society of actually helping me to find a place to stay. I also had principled, conscientious objection to the job provider system as corrupt. This was when I was on Centrelink. Also in the activities that were being not suggested, we had to do the activities. I didn't consider them to be moving me towards that objective of a job. But I would even step back further from that, being an older person, and say, well, social security and social welfare nets, which is being talked about at the moment, is a fundamental to a stable society. It's a fundamental to a civilization. It's actually a statement of who we are, that we have a safety net for people. As the society is starting to recognise now, with 100,000 who lost their jobs, they're no longer calling it, they're still saying, I think, job seeker. But, I mean, these are irrelevant terms when people fall through the cracks due to some sort of shock. And that shock can be economic, it can be, in this case, a health issue, or it can be a family issue, or, a nervous breakdown. People have all sorts of challenges. So it's nice to hear the word social safety net being used by a Liberal government who don't believe in it. It's critical. And that was where some of my objections with the job provider system was all about jobs. And everyone in the society will go, yeah, well, of course it's about jobs. Well, no, it's not. It's about how we create a society that maximises people's happiness. The whole purpose of economics, the whole reason economics was promoted was ultimately was going to make people happy. It wasn't all about making money. It wasn't all about having 2 houses or 3 or 4, getting rent. and living the high life. It wasn't about that. The whole economic system was actually about fairness. Adam Smith, who was one of the foremost economists, he talked about demand and supply, the invisible hand. The whole point was to not allow prices to go too high. So he wanted a mechanism that would, be based on people's demand, and then that supply and that demand would meet at what we call an optimal price. He was concerned about greed, as has always been the case with all economists who have looked at this system, because the system itself is about making money. People give their labour to make wages, or they get paid salaries by employers who are the owners typically of capital or the owners of property. So we've got this class system already structured in place, which brings in an inequality which is not discussed. Now, that inequality is in the structure. It's in the public school system. They typically are the working class. And then we've got the private school system, which has a religious basis, which typically is the signal for the higher paid jobs or those in even higher positions, because there typically can be collegial relationships. People who are in that higher demographic will look for those signs. They'll look for those keywords of people who can take those jobs, those higher paid ones. So we're getting massively huge disparities in income, just even through the structure of the system itself. And of course, other ideas or alternative viewpoints don't even get placed on the table, because it's just labour and capital, or labour and employers. And even the political system represents employers and supposedly the unions, who are moving more right these days. They seem to have lost their way. We don't seem to have very strong opposition. I'm really noting that. We've also got issues of corporate influence, which becomes the funder. They become the equity funders that the government needs because it's having debt issues, or it's been placed into debt through either external circumstances or through its own expenditure. Typically, governments are meant to be in debt. That is normal for government. They're not supposed to be like an accounting balance sheet, which is often most people don't know that. They think that the minute there's any debt, that's a problem, because they think you've got to balance the books, and they're often told that too, and that's not true. Governments are meant to operate in a form of a debt profile. So that's because they're spending money, and that also helps pump prime the economy as well, if it's being spent locally. So I just want to make a bit of a jump, and I know I've sort of moved away from the letter I was going to read, but I'm on a sort of you could say, a bit of a flow here. So I'm just going to go still for a moment. What I'm sharing with you is inequality that's built into the system. So one can spend lots of money, but you're not going to get rid of that inequality. And the inequality has come from the Protestant work ethic, which came from Britain. Australia was, or maybe still is, who knows, I'm still working on that one, British colony. And as a result of that, the Westminster system of law is here. We have an Australian constitution, which is a UK bill. It's actually UK legislation, created the Australian constitution, and I'd advise all Australians to have a look at it. There was also a recent attempt to create a Bill of Rights through Andrew Wilkie, so you might want to go to the Senate, have a look for an Australian Bill of Rights, have a read. It was rejected, but it's very important for Australians. It means that people are able to set a standard of rights that are in legislation, so that people are not abused, or because the system itself is a very toxic system, because we're always travelling along the lines of profit maximising, and we've become very addicted to our material life. People identify very strongly with their positions. They identify strongly with status. They identify strongly with the money that they make. And so therefore those who are unemployed or fall through the cracks, homeless, are looked down upon typically. So there is a normalised and unconscious bias already towards the unemployed and the homeless. And I know that for certain because I've experienced it. I remember when I was working as a market analyst for myself many, many years ago, and my partner had to go overseas and I paid for that trip, and I ended up with no money. So I went to Centrelink. I'd been teaching too at the same time, market research. And I had to actually go to Centrelink. And it was really embarrassing because I met one of my students in the queue and they were shocked, like, why are you here? And then we had some group discussion about unemployment. It was, you know, it was an experience, I'll put it that way. But what I noted was I had 2 meetings that day. One was with a, believe it or not, an energy provider. I was doing market research for contestable energy markets, interestingly enough. And I went to that meeting, treated with respect, as an equal, coffee, it was all good. Then I go to Centrelink and the treatment was different, and I really noted it. And I went, wow, I haven't changed at all, but the perception of me has changed. That was very powerful. I also noted, I'd been into recruiters, like I had been into professional recruiters 2 years ago when I was really on a career path. Whole different reality, plush places you can sit, you're treated with respect. It's like waiting to have a business meeting. It's like that sort of setting. Then in the job provider system, it's completely the opposite. It is quite dishevelled environment. It's cheap furniture. They even have an urn there. I know, I'll never forget it. I won't say who it was, but I'll never forget this job provider. They got an urn there with coffee but no milk, and it's foam cups, and you sit out on the chairs. They make you wait. You come on time, but they make you wait like a doctor's surgery. You know, and it's not that the consultants were, you know, certainly I didn't experience disrespect from consultants, and I think it's probably because of my age. I don't know how they were with the younger ones, but the younger ones reported to me that they were forced to go and hand in their CV. They even went with them. It was really embarrassing. It was like a parent-child relationship. So you see very clearly the difference. That in itself is part of the systemic inequality that renders a person powerless. So when they say, oh, look at them, they won't get up, it's because they've had reinforced over and over that they're second-class citizens. Now, after a time, people just lose the will to, and they give up. Also, when you are constantly pressuring people to apply for jobs they don't want, there's a real sense of being set up to fail that happens. But everyone's looking at numbers. I mean, I'm a statistician myself. They're looking at numbers. So the job provider sends the numbers to Centrelink. Centrelink has a look at the numbers. How many came to the office? You know, how many jobs have you got? How many are working? All they want is get them off Centrelink. Now, that ideology in itself is completely different to when it used to be government provision of employment, which was the Commonwealth Employment Service, CES, way back when I was young. There was none of that attitude. They used to have jobs up on boards and you would automatically get a payment every fortnight. There was no requirements at all. So ideology came in and said, you need to work for that money, because my mantra is everyone should work. Now, that's all very well, and one could easily argue the point there and say, well, look, it generates wealth for the country. Look, it brings in taxation. You know, it ensures, you know, people aren't running feral. They've got things to do. But there's also other societies within the society itself. You've got the caring sector, people who are caring for their parents or sick child, or could have disability issues. We've got different sectors to the economy that are not all about work. And not only that, if we even took a step back even from work and said, well, why am I alive? Why am I here? What would I be doing if I didn't have to work? We might get a whole different reality emerge. I actually followed my own path, which was peace. I dreamed I was teaching peace, and that's why I have had a very strong vocation in this. And I've not been able to take myself off this vocation because it's something I have to do in my life purpose. Now, I could say that to Centrelink and they go, oh, for goodness sakes, get a job, because they're not conscious of the fact that human beings may have a whole range of reasons why they're alive. And who knows, if I'd been supported in the work that I've needed to do, which was teaching peace to children, which was teaching conflict resolution actually, and anti-bullying, if I had had support around all the programs I've written, even as a poet, if I'd had support and literary support there, because I've written 1,500 poems. I'm a writer. I've written books, but there's no support because I'm tracking out on my own here, following what feels right for me and which is of community benefit. But it's not going to make a lot of money. And so society might say, well, if we look at the numbers again here, you're not contributing much to society. But then if I look at, or society looks at, what I've actually produced and what it does for people, let's say values get embedded into someone at a young age, they're not going to go out and steal. They're not going to abuse. They're going to learn how to work in peace and harmony with other people. They're going to create a much better environment. So when you walk past someone, they're not going to be plugged in. They'll be smiling at you. When you're in need, they're not going to ignore you. They're actually going to go and help you because that's what values does. But it's unseen and therefore it's not valued. You can't put an accounting cost on it. But the cost to society is huge, or the profit, I should say, that comes from implementing such a way of being can be huge. But the actual cost to society by not doing it is what we call the opportunity cost, is also large. So this is a sort of a stream of thought, if you like, to sort of reframe value. What is it you value? And we get trained to think in certain ways and we are seeing through a box, but we're not seeing the big picture around that box. We're not feeling how that other might be feeling, how discouraging it is to keep going to a job provider week after week because they want to make money. You have to have contact with them. It's all about them, not you. It's about them making money out of the government, not you just getting a very small amount, which is below the poverty line every fortnight. It's not even indexed to inflation. So then that whole distribution of money, allocation, goes to the job provider because they are in harmony or in alignment with the ideology of the day. And look at those people that are sitting doing nothing at home. No, they're not. They may well have a whole range of reasons why they're not working. And let's face it, I mean, I worked in 400 companies. It's not fun. It's a lot of work that's actually quite boring. Certainly the casualised work is. They're tired and they work bloody hard. And there's no value accorded to what they do in the services, in those labour-intensive industries that are becoming a panacea to those who want the digital reality. Those labour-intensive industries, those people who interface with the public, they deliver great value in those moments. They actually create a sense of community. Why do you think people go to cafes? They're not going for the coffee. They go because they want to feel a sense of community. It's human instinct to want to be together. That's why under these coronavirus times it's extremely hard because people are being separated. Our families are being separated. This is where the real joy in life is with each other. You might think that, okay, we want everybody online, but we don't want to be tracked. We want to have privacy. So how does that tension get dealt with, or does it get ignored as we move into a technocracy where you either comply or go eat cake? Is that the sort of world we really want? What happens if it's your child who goes, I don't want to comply, Dad or Mum. I'm not interested in your world. I actually want to be an opera singer. What do you do with that? And this is going to come over and over again in a myriad of ways across the entire world. People are just going to say, I don't want to do this. Or they're going to feel an emptiness inside because they're not connecting with other humans. You can look at a face on a screen. It's not the same as sitting in front of them in an office or on a park bench or going for a walk in a garden. And maybe these times over coronavirus, people are actually spending more time with each other, which could be a very good thing, where they're actually realising the importance of family. For those who are alone, the homeless, because most homeless are, well, if not, they all have to be single. You know, there's a few couples. I have actually met some couples that were homeless together. But predominantly because of the economic structure, because people become unfunded, which puts them in the category of poverty, they end up without housing because it's a business transaction. It's not a social system that balances. And that's not, you know, the propaganda, and I see it as propaganda these days, of the communist idea, the socialist idea. I used to think that they were real propositions. I don't anymore. Today I actually see it more as power issues, where if there was a competing interest to that power, it then got demonised, whatever it was. And that's not to say there weren't negative things that happened in communist Russia. There certainly were. And that's not to say that there's not merit in enterprise, private enterprise. There is. But it's about balancing all those competing interests, which is where the real leadership is. And I'm not seeing that leadership balanced because they're coming from the same consciousness that creates the problems, which is the economic consciousness, which is flawed in its greed. That's where the flaw is. The idea of trading is fine. I mean, societies were built up through, you know, craft-based industries, agriculture, which turned into marketplaces, you know, industrialisation, which became factories, and they weren't pleasant places for people to work, and mines. So in our drive to profit maximise for those wealthy, you know, owners of property, which have become very wealthy through the extraction of resources, through the processing of those resources into product, and by utilising the rest of the workforce in a way that minimises their income because they're a cost of production. You know, we end up in this world that's in this juggernaut. When I travelled the world, I saw the juggernaut. When I went into third world countries, I could see the multinationals there. And I could see the real disconnect again with the Indigenous people who had no concept of markets. And we think we're progressive, you know, we do. We really think we are superior because of the science, because of the technology, because of the production. But we're not superior. In a collapsing ecological system, which is the really big issue here, this system doesn't work. And I can imagine if people are really trying to grapple around these problems, the difficulty of how do you move from that, and they're saying, well, a technocracy, because then we can control everything. Well, is that the solution? Is that what the people want? Why is power so important? Why is status so important? Is that about the ego? Is it about progress? Really? For whom? When you've got 2/3 of the world's population in poverty, there's not a lot of progress. If we've got a lot of countries with water that's poor quality. It's 2/3. Well, you'd be looking at least half of that without good quality water. Those who die of starvation in this world today, and we're just overloaded with resources, with material possessions. How do we balance that? The poor. I mean, 1.6 billion are homeless around the world. In Australia, 116,000 plus. I would figure probably around 130,000, maybe it's 150, because there'll be plenty of people who won't be wanting to declare that they're stuck. I mean, they'll be desperate, but they may stay with someone. So I don't know, and it'll get higher now that this orchestrated collapse is happening, and it is an orchestrated collapse because the marketplace, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, are collapsing. Even despite, I would say, and I was going to sit with that for the moment, with these payments that are going to pay for casual workers. I just want to sit with it, try and get a feel for it. I don't know. My feeling is it's kind of like solving it from the wrong end. The problem that those small to medium-sized, particularly the retail outlets, are labour-intensive ones, which I know that there is the digital perspective that doesn't want the labour-intensive. It wants online, everything. I'm just saying it as it is because I'm for visibility. I'm not interested in pretense. And I'm not saying I'm right either with what I'm suggesting either. I'm just actually going into problem-solving mode. That dependency type push of money onto the economy, and I understand it's pump priming as well. So $1,500 per employee who's been casualised, who's lost their job. I'm assuming they've lost their job. They may not have. So I don't know if that money is going to keep employees or those who have lost their jobs will get re-employed. The reason I say it's the wrong end because it creates a dependency on that. And it's interesting because that's some ideological perspectives would say welfare creates that dependency, and I wouldn't disagree. Because what we really want to do is empower people. But this is the lockdown scenario here. So they're obviously not going to be able to do any activity. They get a lot of walk-by trade. So they'll be losing a lot of money, more than, even if they get $3,000 per employee, that still doesn't cover their costs. Even though there's a moratorium on rents, that's been frozen. The profit over and above that they lose. So how do they eat? They'd have to go onto Centrelink. And how does that work administratively if they're on Centrelink and they're claiming? You know what I mean? There's a lot of complexity around all the claims here and whether they come through quickly. You're talking about a lot of people here. 70% of the Australian working or economy is service sector. A lot of labour intensive. We've deindustrialised from a manufacturing point of view a long time ago. So that becomes in debt, and I've said this before in one of my other videos, this amount, what was it, $1.5 trillion debt fear, that's a big issue. I just want to sit with it for a moment. I know I'm supposed to be speaking on homelessness, but isn't it? Well, it all kind of is, if you like, these are the things that lead to the homelessness and expanding of it. So I guess I'm just going to explore this whilst I'm doing the video because I'm feeling inspired to. $1.5 trillion is where I'm going. So I'm just going to go still on that It's a lot of money. The debt's a huge issue. What I would like to see is a contraction in the economy, and the reason for that is because we're living beyond our means. I'm just going to go there first. Credit. The credit has been a false signal that was created by the banks in order for people to lend, take out a loan so they can spend more. So we have a false economic activity anyway. It's not rationalised. It's not grounded. It's not a true indicator of demand and supply. And when we have marketing sitting in there stimulating demand, saying you've got to have this, you've got to have that, keep up with this. These are false stimulants to demand, which was not the original intent of economics. Economics was simply designed to, it's a simplistic system really, designed to meet the demand of the public, the society. These are basic demands, not continually through marketing. We look for the market segment, we look for the market wafer. Maybe it's even finer than that now, given there's more competition globally. Now it's all online. There's lots of complexities. And the thing with the online, I'd like to say this because it is sort of heading towards this 1.5 trillion debt, and our beliefs that we're going to make a lot of money out of the digital online reality. What's got to be understood here is the step into this global internet, which is a public internet. There are lots of other intranets which are private. So I just want to make that clear too, that the public don't have access to those other cabling systems. So others can do all sorts of things on other intranets and have privacy and not have ads. But the public global internet, which they're seeking to create one global browser, which is Google. So everything gets funneled through this browser. But the thing is, we'll end up shopping in Thailand. We'll end up shopping in China. So you will find a lot of funds will flow out of the country into these other countries that can do it cheaper. The protectionist idea came around economies because of this international exposure with imports and exports, with encouraging trade, and there were trade walls put in place in order to give some advantage to industries here in Australia so that the competing products price went up because it faced a duty of some sort, import duty. So the local market, the actual physical market, is going to suffer, in my opinion. It could collapse with an online reality where everything's purchased overseas. And I think it may well move us back to protectionism at some point. But because the whole idea here is that we can make money from putting these ads in front of people and stimulate, maybe through the Australian portion of that internet, they try to create those sub-markets so that people will purchase it, but they'll be able to purchase overseas. They will do it because it'll be cheap. Everyone goes for the cheapest price. So China will do well. It's got a big population. Countries with big populations and lower wages will do better because these purchases have to translate into physical goods and then they still have to be moved. I sort of think protectionism has to be a certain amount of protectionism to protect the local market. I think too, in respect of the health impacts, I just want to go to coronavirus for a second. We need to regionalise the country much more. Australia's a big country. I've driven around it. It's huge. There's no reason why we couldn't have smaller communities peppered throughout Australia. rather than huge big cities. And I understand why the drive to build infrastructure and smart cities, this idea of, I can't see I can't see any sustainability benefits personally, because it's still an electrical grid. You haven't moved into free energy, which is, we know, everybody knows, certainly those in power know, there is free energy from Tesla. You could easily, innovatively, seeing the way the government's moved in this crisis, I can see that they could have easily have moved us to a energy-free future. But because of the mining industry, and this is the economic system, these interests become so powerful, and they come into government, or they donate to parties, they become mates, they get to know each other, lobbyists. These are all flaws in our system. And it doesn't create a demand and a supply that meets naturally. It creates fake demand, it creates fake supply in order to maximise those products or services. But again, the ecological issue hangs around that. It's saying you're out of harmony with nature. You cannot continue with this type of juggernaut, whether it's digital cities, smart cities, whatever you want to call it, whether you think that there's going to be depopulation or whatever the issue is that you think you're grappling with. We still haven't come into harmony with the natural system, and that natural system is within us. Now, in my work, I've talked a lot about peace, and it's not some etheric, idealistic notion. There's peace and harmony in the natural order. You just have to go out to nature to feel it. Why do we have holidays in nature? Because we feel peace. So let's put peace in the proper context of what it really is. It's really about making peace with yourself and where you are under, probably I'd say increasingly, crisis situations. This is not the end of it. This is the beginning of it. So how are we going to tackle these problems as they, as is known, there's more pressure now on global elites. There's more pressure on them. And on the other hand, they want to see the world in one big grid. So I want to sit with that too, because that I see this all as conflict mapping. It's like these are all potential problems, all these forces at bay, this inclusive capitalism, where they're all trying to work together to, implement these infrastructures to create this multinational world without small business, which is what it seems to me to be doing, because it's not seen as useful. But that's from a certain economic perspective. It's not from a holistic perspective, which has to balance with nature. So when we disconnect from others and we think they're unequal, or we think they're useless eaters, or we think that they have no value, our value system is based on economics, but that economics is out of balance with nature. And if it stays out of balance with nature, the system collapses. Then what happens to your, 6 billion people? How do we manage that? Can police forces create these police states and create social harmony? Well, it was tried in Queensland under Bjelke-Petersen, and look what happened. There was huge backlash. In the end, they wanted him out. There was inquiries, Fitzgerald inquiry. This was, and it turned out to have a religious foundation through the Catholics and the Protestants. So we've got that as another point of contention in this conflict map. We've got the far-right ideology in this conflict map, which is religious right. Then we've got the secret societies who are holding power in the hands of those within those societies. That's another part of the conflict map. Then we've got different cultural groups who see differently. We've got religious groups. We've got the Israeli influence, which is clearly another part in the conflict map. Zionism is another part. These are all parts. It's like, but we're all the one human family mixing it up. And there's always this seeking for power. That's an old paradigm, still trying to assert itself in the same way. And yet things are changing. Consciousness is changing. That's another aspect to the conflict map. People are awakening. What then? So what I feel as I go through this is uncertainty in many and fear, great fear of loss of control. But the peace work is all about losing control, you see. It's about the real security is in no control. And people would go, what are you talking about? Of course you need to assert control. They'll just go feral. Well, that's your Hobbesian worldview. Is it true? Or will people self-determine? Will people work it out? It can go in many directions. Is it the world of tooth and claw? Or is it a libertarian world? John Locke, he's the English philosopher. Scottish, actually. So these are turbulent times we're in right now. And the fear of poverty is another aspect to the conflict map. Huge fears around poverty because we have memory of it, all of us. But we are ultimately the one family, and the earth is changing and consciousness is changing. So I'm going to go still now and try and get some sort of sense, because I'm holding a lot of ideas in my mind from lots of angles, and I've just allowed it to come out authentically without filter because I want to help everyone. At our level of consciousness in the human condition, we have a lot of fear. We've created a fear-based culture. UNESCO did try to create and institute a culture of peace, which was things like non-violence, values, respect, working together. That has been to some degree sidelined. The Human Rights Council also and the UN was seeking to address human rights issues, which is really the outcome of abuse. If we just want to put the appropriate, label to it, it's abuse. There are some who want unfettered abuse, and there's some who are saying no to it. Essentially is what that's about. So this culture of fear permeates our world. It has been instituted in our structures. It has come from the basis that I need to make you frightened in order to get you to do what I want. So we created systems of punishment. We created systems of fines, systems of, some form of consequence, that if you don't do the right thing as we say it, there will be a consequence. This institutes fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It's an energy that shuts down. It's disempowering, works against that vital energy of humanity, which is to be inspired, to be creative, to be positive, to love one another. All these things are part of the human value system, which is when we choose love over fear. Love is no nanny statement. It's a very foundational energy which unifies the world in actual fact to head in the direction that will maximise not only its survival but its potential. But always there's been the dance between the fear and the love. The wars create that drama, keep the money coming in through the military-industrial complex, which is another factor in that conflict map. Shadow government, deep state. These are all factors on the map. Now, when I look at all these factors on my conflict map, I send them all love because they're my human family. They're all labelled in this way or the other, but one way or another, they're all seeking power and they're all seeking happiness, actually. So let's go there, because that's what we're all really wanting. But it's a little bit like you're 194 nations all pulling in opposite directions. And I just will premise this by saying that I remember when I was with Rotary in Hawaii, and the crowd was, the Rotarians were all walking this way, and I was actually standing at the side watching, and I do typically do that, but I also walk the other way as well. The crowd actually was not moving in the same direction. Sorry, I got that wrong. They were all moving in different directions. That's why I made that mental note at the time. And I'm thinking, imagine if Rotary could just move in the same direction. They say they want to do good, but move in the same direction. And I saw the global picture when I was standing to the side looking at the people. I thought, if only the world could all work together. And I guess Buckminster Fuller has to drop in here because he's the one that's talking about working for 100% of humanity. Buckminster Fuller was the one who created the geodesic domes and Earthship. He talked about the world as Earthship. And he had the world peace game that he created. So it was really about collaboration and us working together. Now, going to the inclusive capitalism part of my conflict map, you're all working in your own group to benefit your own interests. And because you're a closed group, you don't actually know the other groups around you. You have perceptions of what we call in international relations an imagined community. Oh, there are this and there are that. And yeah, you may have visited a few of them. You may have met, doesn't mean you know the world community. You certainly don't know the purpose of every soul on the planet and why we're here. Everyone's got their own talent and mission and value, and all those values are equal values. But in our little groups, World Economic Forum, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, Chinese Communist Party, we've got the Russian Politburo, we'll call it that, that's probably changed now. All these groupings, government groupings, the G8, influential groups that feed into those supposed powerful groupings because they're economically well funded and they have the money to be able to get people to do what they want. We're still living in silos, believing that our world view is the right one. And that's not different from all those nations pulling in opposite directions, or what I've sometimes used is the donkey analogy, where donkeys are tied together and they pull in different directions. But what they really want to do is come together and eat together. We have incredible potential on this planet in all the people. And you will find even in the homeless, who are the ones you see as, they're just, useless. Look at them. They can't even get a job. There's all these prejudices that come up around it. It's totally untrue. And where the focus is wrong is in seeing them as less. And that inequality has been normalised, and it's untrue. Everyone has spectacular potential. I knew this as a child. We've got incredible potential, all of us. But we get, sort of delegated into this role, that role. I'm seen as a this and I present as a that, and all these things are untrue. We actually have the capability to really create an amazing planet where everybody wins. It doesn't have to be us against them. It doesn't have to be imposing systems on people so that we benefit, because you'll lose in that type of system. You always will lose, because nature is about homeostasis and balance. Nature is not separate from you and I. It's not separate from those decisions that discount the rest of humanity. It's not separate from that. And then people will charge ahead with these beliefs that this is the way, smart cities is the way. Then we can monitor everything. We still make money. We can still make the money. We can keep it going, at least until we die. What happens after that, we don't care because we're not here. Well, you can think like that, but we live on, and those implications are felt. And it does return to us one way or another when we harm others in our pursuit of our own interests, when we just simply discount the rest of the world. That's why 2/3 are in poverty, is because they've been discounted. There's been prejudices that have stopped that natural flow of abundance. which would have been there. We, in our consciousness, also have a flow of wellness, a flow of abundance. It's actually, we think we're living on a limited space here, but actually we're unlimited. We're unlimited in the solutions we can actually develop here if everybody's included. Not just as the few that think that they have the entitlement to make decisions on behalf of humanity. You don't have entitlement to make decisions on behalf of humanity. Nobody does. But we can pull together as a collective, all of us, and solve these problems. The answers and solutions are there for sure, and it's not about depopulating the planet. I can assure you the problem has not been tackled clearly on that front. Yes, you know, I like David Attenborough. I think he's gorgeous. He's actually one of my favourites, and if he was younger, he's a man I'd marry. And I understand as a biologist and a scientist that he sees that we're overpopulating. Well, I would beg to differ. People say, well, who are you to beg to differ with him? This guy's done all the BBC programs. What are you, a peace clown? True. Can't deny I'm not a biologist. But what I can say is my perspective, and this is coming at from an equality perspective. We're all equal. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring too. What I'm saying is population's not an issue. The issue is consumption. The issue is imbalance. Imbalance is the issue, not the number of people on the planet. And what I mean by that is we're reaching for far more things than we need. And anyone can testify. There's plenty of evidence. Just go look in your own house how much stuff you don't use. But we'll say, no, that's the economic system. That's what made me money. It was a false demand. It extracted resources in a way that was wasteful. This is not homeostasis or sustainability. This is, I push out those products and services because I've got to maximise profit, because I've got shareholders. And I want status and I want to buy the house here and the other house there. Materialism is the addiction that's not being looked at. And it's not to say you can't live a life of abundance. Of course you can. But we have to think about the types of demand signals we're sending out there. Now, whilst all this is happening, 30,000 satellites going up into space to spy on everyone. 30,000 satellites. This is to run the AI, I'm guessing, and automation. 30,000 satellites. So instead of when I look up at the sky and I look for stars, I won't know which is a star and which is a satellite. And are they looking at me? This is unregulated. This is running amok. This is a single-minded viewpoint of maximising profit through this type of arrangement. And it's disconnected from the holistic system of ecological balance, tipping points, species, environment, temperature, oxygen. And then we've got the military also. They just came into my mind just then as another part of this conflict map. Military-industrial complex and the militaries. How much money has been wasted on weaponry when really what would have solved it is a balancing of the masculine and the feminine. The military is very masculine. Any sort of boys' clubs are masculine. This is unchecked with the feminine. This is why it doesn't work. Same with the secret societies, who are predominantly male, well, all male. And I know and I feel that they have been seeking to reach for a higher spirituality and a nobility. Their words, knights, orders, these rituals, which can tout very highly elevated virtue. But you've just cut out 50% of the population in these orders and say, oh, we don't want women here. We want to be with men. But That's fine. But the thing is, when you become a power block, when you have influence, and when those who are part of your order are the ones that you select for those jobs, then a distortion comes into the bigger world outside of that secret society. Now, the feminine is not just an annoyance or someone you can't live without, or, oh, I have to get married, or whatever it is that you think the feminine is. Let's just say female. I'll use female because the feminine and masculine are in the male and the female. But let's just say sex, for male and female. Without the balance of these two in harmony, planet goes haywire. The masculine and the feminine are part of nature, and they must balance. Nature has in its blueprint the balancing point of feminine and masculine. So in an individual, for example, to balance the male and the masculine, the feminine energies within. So if I can be both nurturing and also directive, if I can be compassionate, and they're not hard and fast divisions actually, because the masculine is compassionate too. It's just that with the testosterone, there's more of a feistiness, there's more of a forward movement with the masculine energy. If you look at boys, they tend to rough it up, and they're very physical. The girls can be much more chatty, much more emotional, more feeling, play with the dolls, etc. There's a more emotional landscape there. But within each human houses both. So it has to be unified for stability on the planet. And people might say, well, that's all, that sounds a bit sort of out there. It's like, well, how do you make that concrete? How do we move from step A to step B? So this is the logic. Or is it organic? That it has to evolve. It's an evolving realization. So it's not a linear planning model here. It's an evolving realization of who you are on the basis of these competing issues on our conflict map. But as I said earlier, everybody is seeking happiness. Everybody wants to learn. We all love learning. We're an amazing species in actual fact. We are extraordinary when we decide to rise to the heights of who we are against all this adversity. And our planet's not an easy one in which to navigate. It's not. It's probably one of the hardest places to be. However, our job is to overcome those negatives. So that culture of fear I talked about earlier, we've got to bring in the culture of harmony, culture of homeostasis, of balance. We've got to balance these energies, the feminine, the masculine. We've got to balance the materialism. Instead of promoting more and more product, which is based on an economic system that's flawed and out of harmony with nature, we have to look at other ways of exchange. We have to come into an understanding that what you've got, you need. What you don't have, you don't need. This is the natural order. To say to yourself, and I tend to use the Fool as the archetype here, when you step off the cliff, something comes. So this is like stepping into uncertainty. And in actual fact, whether you do it consciously or not, life is going to bring it to you in any case. You are going into uncertain times, and they're uncharted waters without doubt. Even those who are perhaps seeking to orchestrate this uncertainty, that's also coming from high perspective. So the real issues here is, how do we manage uncertainty? Now, the knee-jerk reaction is control, but control is only going to create more disruption and more contention, more dissension, because what you resist persists, what you look at disappears. So you can't go down the control route. You can try, go for it. If you want a homeland security in the United States, home affairs here, if you want to create that police state, go for it and have a look at what happens. Have a look through history, what has happened. It's not hard to see. It doesn't work. As Gandhi said, empires always fall, and they do, because they become blinded by their own power. When you think you're the master of the universe and your brothers and sisters are your fraternity and the rest you don't care, you then are saying to life that I am not in harmony with the whole life spectrum here. I am pinching that off and I'm just looking after my own. I'm discarding my impact on that other. Life just brings it back to you because it's all energy response. Nature, E equals MC squared, nature responds because we're not separate from anything. So as you think it, your opposite turns up. As you fight it, here it comes. Law of attraction. You have to understand the basic universal principles that are driving these dynamics. Now, if you want peace, you have to question your own thinking because you've got stress happening. When you've got stress happening, it means you're out of alignment with your own inner truth. Inner truth is not Descartes or philosophy or science. Truth is what feels right within you, and you'll know it because you won't feel stressed, you'll feel peace. That's how you know you're in harmony. And so the times we're moving into are uncharted, but they are requiring a shift in consciousness if you wish to navigate it in a way that everyone is looked after, inclusive of the homeless, who are really just a mirror of inequality. That's what the homeless are. They are also serving a purpose to witness and to sit there on the street showing people to themselves. They're teachers as well. They're also surviving in the area where everybody's most terrified of being because I've got nothing. I'm a nobody. No rights, nothing. So they are the testimonial of everyone's greatest fears. And if they've got mental health or they've got drug addictions, we go, oh my God, I'd hate to fall that far. But they're actually a mirror to the aspect of ourselves that's in pain, that's addicted, that's struggling. A reminder. So when homelessness is actually gone, that's when our civilization has healed. The healing comes from love. That's why love is not some wussy term. As I said in the beginning, it's very much a foundational energy which provides real security. But it's been blocked because we've been trained to block it, to deny it, to push it away, to see it as the feminine, when in actual fact the love is the father to the son, the father to the daughter, the father to the wife to the father, the wife to the child or partner or however you want to work it. It's I love you. It's looking at the people on the street and saying I love you. On the tram, I love you. Wherever you go, I love you. You're worthy, you're worthy, you're worthy, and so are you. And that's what I learned as a peace clown. Everyone's worthy. Everyone. And the moment I reflect love out into the world, it comes back. So if you're doing policy, it needs to be loving and it needs to be real. It can't just be, let's spin this, let's spin that. The spinning won't work because the universe knows. We live in an intelligent universe. For some, an all-powerful, wise creator. For others, an incredibly intelligent ecosystem. Lots of ways to see. Nature's going to help bring us onto the same page because the more we fight against each other with all these false divisions, with all these separations, nature will shake us all up. So all those groups that I've mentioned, all going to be shaken up because nobody's in control of the planet, nor the cosmos. But where we are in control is of ourselves, and where we can make a difference is to know thyself and be true, to stand up for what we know is right for ourselves, to not participate in activities that cause harm to others, because the harm comes back. as a universal law. It's just nature. Nature does that. So we're at a precipice here of great potential. Great potential. You can jump off and find that there is actually something to land on, or you can keep away from that edge and keep pushing it away as you build more economic solutions. But economics is not the solution here. The solution is a spiritual solution. It's a shift in consciousness that sees the world in a different way and makes changes within, makes changes by the way we live. We start to live in eco-villages. We live in smaller community. We have free energy going. We collect our own water. We have to depollute the planet. We have to resolve all conflicts. So rather than departments of defence, we need departments of conflict resolution. We need to start to work on this. We can deploy those guys that were engaged in the military, bring more women in as well, and start to work on environmental solutions. The New Earth Army made that suggestion. That was Jim Shannon. I suggest some of the military guys look it up. To deploy the militaries in service of humanity, not in service of business interests, not as mercenaries, making $1,000 a day as if money is all that matters. It doesn't. What you do with your life, serve your people, is what really matters, and they're the real heroes. They're the ones that matter. Everyone is of equal value, but those are the decisions that are going to make a real difference if we're going to move forward into a more evolved society. We have to teach our children differently. Can't just put them all on computers and rewire the neural networks and say, oh, we don't care as long as we make money. That's not loving the children. Children need to learn about their own needs and wishes and wants. They need to know who they are. You know, that they by all means learn the reading, writing and all the rudimentaries, but they need to go into exploring things. They need to utilize these tools as they fashion what it is that they feel passionate about. We need to teach them emotional intelligence. When they hit that child's hurting, and this is how we deal with that. We apologise, make it right. We solve our problems. We don't form little bullying groups and bully each other. If you really want children to thrive in the future, you've got to stop putting them in front of violence. It's all very well for people to say, oh, well, we get the next wave of soldiers. We don't want that anymore. It doesn't work. $1 trillion plus spent on military every year when we've got people starving on the planet, that's a false economy. We need to start to bring into alignment the spending with the actual real need of people. Let's get them into a parity position where they're all equal around the world, and let's inspire them to live to their greatest potential. And that takes a jump. That takes a big jump out of a paradigm which is all about me. But as we see things starting to break down around us, and this is breaking down, we have to shift our consciousness into a new way of seeing where you are me. I'm not going to go the Illuminati of this and that. I'm going to say you are my brothers and sisters too. The poor in Africa, my brothers and sisters too. Even the criminal gangs, brothers and sisters you are. You've chosen a pathway. Your questioning is going to be, does this really serve you? Is this going to serve society? Because the greatest profit is going to come from those who truly serve the society. Because the society are them. The society are their family. The society is their future as a civilization. That's the line drawn in the sand here. Or do we keep continuing on with the false beliefs that this one's superior to that one when they're not? You all come in through the birth canal. You put a baby in a privileged position, of course they're going to think that way. How many children have been adopted into privileged families and had better education and found great jobs? Those who are birthed into families that are very poor have hardly anything, no education, a lot of fighting and conflict because they're unhappy. because they feel the inequality. See, a lot of that anger that you're seeing in the lower socioeconomic groups is coming from, you make me feel like I'm worthless, so I'm going to act out that. I'm angry because I'm not getting a fair shake of the stick here. I can see that I can't get through it, but I'm blaming myself and I'm angry with me. I need to go and get a job, but I can't, or I need to educate, but I have to have 2 jobs in order to do it. See, these are the sort of impediments that pitch one against the other. And we say, well, you are lower socioeconomic, I am higher socioeconomic, but each can have a nervous breakdown. Each has to eat. Each lies horizontally, sits down. We have far more in common than separate. But it's this mentality of separation that's really sinking the planet. So coming full circle to homelessness, and I guess I'll have to finish it on here because I'm sure I've gone for ages. This has been a massive discussion. All homelessness is the closing of the heart by those who witness that person has no home and they do not offer them a place to sleep. And the reason they don't do that is because of all the fears that have been indoctrinated into them. They might be dangerous, they might be on drugs, they might steal my things. In reality, none of that's happened. So they need to question for truth around that. So that homelessness means home is where the heart is. When your heart closes down, homelessness is there. When your heart opens, homelessness no longer exists. Unemployment will not exist when the heart opens. Having nothing to do or boredom or, abuse in the family, all these things will not exist when the heart is open. The love-based consciousness will create the greatest change, way beyond what you can imagine. Because when we truly go for what we love, we'll do it for nothing. I've worked for 20 years for nothing because of the love within me is so great for the humanity, because I see myself in them. And even when they don't help me, even when they're rude to me, even when people have been cruel, when I've been set up, when I've confronted indifference that made me want to not be here, I still love them. Why did I love them? Because they know not what they do. Who said that? Very popular teacher. And because I know they don't know, forgiveness is there. They don't know they don't know. They think they're right. That's ignorance. When you're so locked into, I know I'm right, you're not going to give any grounds for anybody else to have a say, because you've got to be certain and you've got to be right, and you're going to have a glee club around you who will all support you in that. But what if you're wrong? And there's no crime in being wrong. When I know I don't know, that's when the beginning of wisdom emerges within you, because you opened possibilities. I could be wrong, but it's not, you're not identifying with the word wrong, like, oh, I'm wrong. It's more, I could be wrong. It's an idea. I could be right, I could be wrong. Let's explore. I'm not attached to my ideas. I'm here to learn the truth. So you can either go down the path, and this is where the real division is. You can go down the path of, I am right, and I don't care what you think. Or you can go down the path of, what is the real truth here? I might be wrong. Now, the path that leads us to happiness is the one where you live in the truth of who you really are. And you know it's true because you feel happy. The one that takes you down, I am right and I don't care, and I'm just going to blindside everybody, is the path that will lead you to a more control paradigm, and you'll never be happy. So in order for us all to become happy, which was the whole purpose of these systems thinking, you have to really deeply go into whether you want to live a life of rightness or righteousness, some of it can call it. I'm right, you're wrong. Or you're going to move into a pathway of, I'm seeking the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God. If you don't believe in God, so help me nature. So I'm going to leave it there. This was totally unexpected, the way I've just done this video. This is the first time I've done one like this. And rather than it being a homeless video, it ended up being a global one. So I have to trust my flow because I'm looking for the truth, you see. That's why I allowed the video to go this long. Truth takes time. But hopefully it can be of great service to you. So with that, I'm going to love you and leave you. And I hope this starts a conversation somewhere. I send you much love. Bye.